Heroes Like Us is a series intended at sharing comic book characters from various backgrounds and identities. We won't always get everything right, so feel free to make amendments and corrections in the comments. They're always appreciated. What's not appreciated, however, is any form of hate speech or intolerance, so comments of that nature will be immediately deleted and those users blocked from this channel. This is a place of education and celebration. Welcome to IAYTD and welcome to Heroes Like Us. So this is our series where we look at a certain identity and then we look at certain heroes and villains that have that identity. So today we are diving into Australia and we have 7 characters we're going to go through. We're doing so many because some of them are fairly new or superficial, so we're going to cram as much into this video as we can. So let's dive in with 2 of the most obvious ones, starting with the Marvel villain Boomerang. His real name is Fred Myers, and he was born in Australia, though he moved to the US when he was young. He was an incredible athlete, and he had a great pitching arm. Things didn't really quite work out, so he went into a life of crime, and he used this pitching arm to basically wield weapons. And so he had created for him specific weaponized boomerangs. And so some of these would explode, some of them would have ropes, and they would tie up people. They served different purposes. Now, Boomerang on his own became a bit of a joke where he couldn't really take anyone out. He was constantly getting defeated. He was no one really took him seriously, but he found his strength when he worked in a team. So in groups like the Sinister Six or in the Masters of Evil. Other than the weapons he was given, there's really nothing special about him. This also ties into our kind of second character and DC's version of Boomerang, Captain Boomerang. The first Captain Boomerang goes by the name George Digger Harkness. Like our first Boomerang, he also started to lead a life of crime and used his ability to wield a boomerang to his advantage. Likewise, also creating boomerangs that had different utilities. He moved to the US, he kind of became a regular in the crime community, but he really kind of found his first prominent place in DC Comics when he became a member of the Suicide Squad. And he was a member of the Suicide Squad for a long, long time. He's one of kind of the original crew. But no one really liked him and no one meshed with him. He was not only evil in what he did, but he was also racist and sexist and unlikable, which caused a huge rift between him and his other teammates. There was a time when his son took up the mantle of Captain Boomerang, but since kind of the New 52 and kind of the reboot of the DC universe, it is back to Digger Harkness being a prominent member of the Suicide Squad. Captain Boomerang was featured in the Suicide Squad movie played by Jai Courtney. So I got those ones out of the way because those are the ones that people with Australian descent or from Australia probably aren't super proud of them because they're basically stereotypes and cliches. But let's get into the more interesting and nuanced characters that come from Australia. And next up from Marvel Comics, we have the mutant Tempest, whose real name is Eva Bell. She's a mutant with the ability to basically control time, but specifically she does this inside of bubbles, where she'll create kind of this dome, and everything inside might move at 1/1000th of the rate. You know, something crazy, where it's like she can create these little time bubbles. She has exhibited the ability to do larger scale time travel and to stop all sorts of things or to even go through time, but this really relies on her stress and her kind of the urgency to save people that are close to her. Those are the only instances where she's been able to really do something incredible. She is considered to be a near Omega level mutant because we don't really know the potential of what she can do. There is an interesting story where she spent time in the year 2099 in the future where she studied under the Sorcerer Supreme, and that is, in our current time, Doctor Strange. But in the future, it is held by the mutant Magic, who is the sister of Colossus. So Magic kind of taught Tempest how to use her powers a little better before she went back to our current time. One of the most notable things that Tempest is known for is recently stopping the mutant known as Matthew Malloy, who is beyond Omega level. That his ability to alter reality was basically a threat to everything in existence. And so no one was able to stop him, but Tempest was able to travel back in time and stop his parents from meeting, which means that he was never born, so he ceased to exist. Tempest is a relatively new character, so there's not a whole lot else to talk about. Up next from Marvel Comics, we have a character known simply as Gateway. Gateway is a silent indigenous Australian. So he doesn't really talk much, but some people are able to communicate telepathically with him. But his ability is to travel from point to point. And he can do this even throughout realities. And so he can take a group of people and take them somewhere else or into an alternate timeline. He can travel that way. And so he began as basically a slave to this group called the Reavers. And they were bandits and thugs. And they would use Gateway to travel to places, steal a bunch of stuff, and then return back. But he was liberated by the X-Men, and then he served the X-Men for a long time, helping them get from mission to mission until he eventually gave his life when he teleported them somewhere, but he wasn't able to kind of go through before he was killed. But before he was killed, we did have a time where he tutored another Australian mutant with a similar ability to his. So here's where we meet Manifold. Eden Fessy. Is that how you pronounce it? Fessy? I've never heard this said out loud. Eden Fessy. We'll go with that. So he is another indigenous Australian. His ability is also like Gateways to travel from point to point. And so he kind of also creates these gateways in a very similar fashion. Manifold was also physically able to fight. And so he trained and he became a member of the New Warriors. And he kind of did a lot more frontline missions than Gateway did. So he would see him kind of out with a team, fighting and doing his thing. Now there is one thing that makes Manifold and Gateway different. And that is that Gateway could travel from reality to reality, but Manifold, if he were to ever travel to another reality, his powers would not work. So his powers are tied to this reality, and there's a theory that there is one Manifold in each reality, and they are confined to their reality, but they're in charge of basically keeping that reality safe. We thought that Manifold was dead for a time, but lately he's come back, and we don't really know quite what happened or if he's really him, but Manifold has been assisting Black Panther in some recent storylines to help protect Wakanda. Up next from Marvel Comics, we've got another villain named Pyro, St. John Allardyce. Pyro is a mutant with the ability to control fire. Now the tricky thing here is that he cannot create fire. So you'll often see Pyro wearing kind of this getup that can create fire, or he's carrying like a lighter. He's carrying something to create fire, which he can then engulf, and he can change it and he can make that flame larger, but he needs something to start the flame for him. In terms of how much control he has over this fire, he can change the shape, he can even change the density. He's been shown to create flame constructs that can grab and lift something or push against a wall. Like they have density to them, which is quite extraordinary. Pyro does have kind of a complicated history, and he's not always a villain. Before he kind of turned to a life of crime, he was an aspiring novelist, and he wanted to write. He kind of wrote these like trashy romance novels. And even later, he was killed at a rally where it was a senator who's kind of anti-mutants, and someone was going to assassinate that senator, and he stepped in the way and took the bullet. And so Pyro was killed basically by the people that he used to fight with, by the Brotherhood of Mutants. So some interesting back and forth, but Pyro is now, as far as we know, dead. He was played in the X-Men films by Aaron Stanford. Our last person for today is from Marvel Comics. They're brand new, and this is an Inhuman by the name of Panacea, or their real name, Ash Minnick. Panacea has the ability to basically control health, and that either means healing, so they can heal, restore, or they can injure and deteriorate health when they need to. So basically health management is their power. Again, brand new, only in a couple storylines, but someone really interesting to potentially look out for. So that is it for this video. Can you think of other Australian characters? If you can, let me know in the comments, and when we do a part 2, I'll make sure to shout out those characters. Thanks for watching. Check out the other Heroes Like Us videos. We'll see you next time.